Today's guest, Charlotte Mandell, has translated over 50 books of fiction, poetry, and philosophy from French. Her translation include works by Marcel Proust, Maurice Blanchot, Abdelwahab Meddeb, and Jean-Luc Nancy. Her translation of Compass by Mathias Enard was shortlisted for the International Booker Prize 2017 and was the recipient of 2018 ALTA National Translation Award in Prose. She was named a Chevalier in the Order of Arts and Letters for her work by the French government and has received the Thornton Wilder Translation Prize from the American Academy of Arts and Letters. Her translation of Mathias Enard's The Deserters was longlisted for the International Booker Prize 2026. Here she is, Charlotte Mandell on Harshananeeyam podcast.
Yeah, so I went to Boston Latin School, which is the oldest school in America. It was founded in 1635. And I took 5 years of Latin and 2 years of ancient Greek and also French. And so that's when I first started translating Latin. I was in an advanced placement Latin course, and we translated all of the Aeneid. And I loved that. I loved being able to, like you say, bring this dead language to life. And I think all translation is like that. Just making something else live in your own language. There's something very fascinating and kind of wonderful about that. And I actually just found my translation of the Aeneid recently, and it's not that bad. I think I might go back to it someday. But also at the time, both of my parents were college teachers, and so we had the summers off, and we would travel every other summer to the French Alps or the Swiss Alps. And so that's how I first got exposed to the French language. And then I had this wonderful teacher in high school, a French teacher from Normandy, and she was almost my age. We were almost the same age, so we were like best friends. Her name was Michel de Piètre, and so I would just hang out with her after school and speak French. And we put on a French play, Le Petit Prince, in French at Latin school, and so I was very involved in both French and Latin, and I just knew that I really wanted to continue translating after I graduated. And I feel really lucky that I can do that I can do what I really love to do.
You are mentored by the great Pierre Joris. How was the experience like?
Pierre Joris actually introduced me. He's responsible for my first book, my first published book. Pierre Joris was actually my husband's student at Bard College. Pierre was straight from Luxembourg. He came to Bard, and his senior project was translations of Ceylon. So that was his life work. I mean, that's what he continued to do for the rest of his life. Robert, my husband, now is my husband, but he taught at Bard College for a long time, since 1961. Pierre was there in the late 60s. So Pierre was a good friend of Robert, and so that's how I met Pierre. And through Pierre, he had been asked by an editor at Stanford University Press to translate a book by Blanchot, and he didn't have time. And I was very young; I was just in my 20s. But he recommended me, and so I sent in a chapter. It was The Work of Fire, La Part du Feu. And he liked it, and that was my first published book. And so I feel like I sort of owe my career to Pierre. I'm very grateful to him. And also he introduced me to some other writers too. I also went to Bard, and at Bard you have to, when you're a senior, you do what's called a senior project, which is a written thesis or a creative project. And mine was a book-length translation of poems by a contemporary French poet named Jean-Paul Auxmery. And he was a friend of Pierre, so that's how I came across him. So that was a book of poems. And then he also introduced me to the poet Abdelwahab Meddeb, a Tunisian poet. And I ended up translating several books by Meddeb and meeting him in Paris. And so I feel very grateful to Pierre for introducing me to these people and getting my first book. He's just a wonderful person. I miss him a lot. He was a wonderful friend to have.
What's your translation routine like?
I usually translate in the afternoons. I'm not a morning person. And I wish is it like 5:30 in the morning where you are?
Yeah, that's
right now?
Yeah, right.
Oh my goodness. That's amazing. Yeah, I couldn't do that. I wouldn't be able to do that. I can't really think until about sometime afternoon. I don't know why. I think maybe because I was born at night at 11:23 at night. So I'm always a night person. So I think I do my best work late in the afternoon or in the evening. Sometimes I'll work up until about 2 in the morning. Um, and also there's fewer distractions at night, I find. I don't, there's no telephone calls.
There's no telephone calls. Yes, absolutely. And is there any set target per day? You have to translate so many words or you have to edit so many words?
Usually it's a number of pages. So right now I'm translating Mélancolie des confins, which I'm translating as The Melancholy of Borders by Mathias Énard. It's not really a memoir. It's a sort of, it's a book about books. Oh. He was living in Berlin and it's about his time in Berlin and about books that he read while he was there. And that's 320 pages. And so right now I'm trying to do about 5 pages a day. It's due in middle of April and I'm almost finished.
So 5 pages in a day for about 5 to 6 hours in a day?
No. It takes about 2 hours, 2 hours to do maybe 5 pages. It depends on what the pages are like. If I have to do a lot of research, he quotes a lot of books, so I have to, like right now he's quoting from Aristotle. So I have to find Meteorologica by Aristotle and have to look up some of these quotes. And he also quotes from various German books, Lenz by Buchner, some other ones. And so I have to find translations of these. Sometimes I translate them directly from the French. It depends. Like if I want to make it sound as if, because Enard is working from French translations a lot of the time. So I want to show what he's working from instead of the English translations. So sometimes I'll translate his French. It depends. But I can't usually work more than like 2 or 3 hours, I think, at a time because it's very tiring. It's sort of like hearing a voice in your head and you're channeling it. And so it requires a lot of concentration. For me, at least. I don't know. Different people are different. I mean, I know some translators that can translate for hours a day, and I just couldn't do that.
You also translated Marcel Proust. He's famous for writing long, winding sentences. How did you handle his prose while translating?
With Proust, as you say, it is very difficult because you get sort of caught up in these long sentences and you want to do justice to. I never want to break up a sentence or break up a paragraph. I always want to stay true to Proust's style. And so I try to stay as faithful as possible to the syntax. Sometimes I'll have to change word order because grammar in French is different from English grammar. So sometimes the object in French will come much later, whereas in English we usually put the object earlier. So sometimes I'll have to change the word order, but I do try to keep the syntactical order of the sentence as much as possible. And also like in general, I don't read ahead. So actually I'm translating or reading as I translate. So I'm reading the sentence as I translate it. And in a way with Proust that helps because you're inside of the thought as it's happening. So you're within the sentence as it's unfolding. And then you find out how it turns out at the end. And then of course at the end, then you go back and you revise it and you can change things. But I like to try not to read too much ahead. I like to try to stay within each sentence as I'm translating it. And I think that helps me. And it also helps bring the text to life more because I don't really know what it's going to say. I don't know what's going to come next. So So sometimes I'm sort of guessing, but I don't know. And so it makes me stay true more to the original, I think. Um, I'm definitely not writing into it. I'm not putting myself into it. I'm trying to stay true to what the sentence says. But it's very difficult, especially like the one that I just finished translating, which is In the Shadow of Girls in Blossom. It's been translated before by Moncrief and also by James Grieve. And so for that, I had to look at their translations and see what they did with each sentence. And so that took a long time because I had to make sure that I wasn't replicating what they said and just to see how they interpreted different sentences. So it's actually much harder for me. I also translated a book of Proust that hadn't been translated before called The Mysterious Correspondent. And for that was easier in a way because nobody had done that before, and I had more creative ability to do what I liked with that. But with In the Shadow of Girls in Blossom, there is like a sort of obligation to try to be as faithful as possible to the French, and also to try to bring it to life more. I mean, to try to make it my language, which is challenging. I mean, Proust is his style is so different. I mean, in French even it's different. It's not like a normal style. So, yeah, it's definitely a challenge.
I think in Beyond the Zero podcast interview, you said you kept Proust's French original and also Moncrief's translation and other translation all open together, and you started translating. That's very interesting. Actually, people, some translators I have interviewed, if they're retranslating a book, they say that they won't prefer to read the others' translations because they feel that they might get influenced by the other translator. So how would you avoid it?
Yeah, I know.
Yeah.
Yeah, a lot of people don't want to read the other
Yeah.
ones, but
Yeah.
for me it was important because I wanted to see it, and also just to see if I was completely off the mark. Like maybe I didn't get the meaning or I just wanted to make sure that that it wasn't wrong in some way. Um, but it made it much more difficult having those there, and they're also you feel them sort of staring at you. So, yeah, I like translating Énard because I'm his only translator, so I don't have to compare myself to anybody else.
So who is your first reader once you think that you have finished your
My
French?
first reader is my husband, actually, Robert Kelly, because every day when I do my 5 pages, he calls it his bedtime story.
Oh,
I
every
read
day.
to him
That's interesting.
every day. So, and it helps a lot because then when I read it out loud, I can hear how it sounds. And if it sounds strange or if it doesn't sound, something doesn't sound English, then I can change it right away. And he's a literature professor, so he's a very good editor, and he's also a poet and a writer. So he's very helpful in editing all of my work. But especially this one, this Énard, is every day I read my 5 pages, and he demands his bedtime story.
Nice. Does he read French?
No, he reads French, but he doesn't speak it so much. But he can read it. He's very good in German. He can speak and read German, and I don't speak German or read it, so he helps in that way too. Because there's a lot of German in this book that I'm doing now.
Now we will come to Matthias. You have been working with Mathias Enard for a very long time. How do you describe his writing style? And what drew you to him? What drew you
So I first started Mathias Enard when I translated Zone, which is it's a 517-page sentence, one sentence.
to?
And I discovered it in a journal that was being sent out by the French Publishers Agency. They would send it to translators, and they would include excerpts from books that haven't been published yet. And I read this excerpt from Zone, and I just thought I had to translate it because there was nothing like that out there at the moment. And so I was very lucky that I immediately, Chad Post at Open Letter was interested in publishing it. And so I ended up working with him. And that was the first book that I published by Énard, and that was also the first book that Fitzcarraldo ever published.
Oh,
The English publishing company Fitzcarraldo,
yeah, yeah.
um, they're a big proponent of Mathias Enard's work, and Zone was the first book that they published. So I feel really grateful that I found that excerpt in that magazine. It was just by chance. I mean, nobody asked me to do it. I chose it. Um, so I think it's hard to describe his writing. I guess I would say it's very erudite, but it's also very poetic and rhythmic. There's a rhythm matters a lot in his writing, um, and there are many references to other books. There's a section in the book that I'm translating now about how he talks about how literature is like the way that atoms are formed from other atoms. Literature is formed from other books, like texts come from other texts. Or not atoms, but sorry, cells come from other cells. Literature comes from texts. And so reading and other books are very important to him. So there's many references to, especially in Compass, which was also that was shortlisted for the International Booker Prize in 2017. Lots of references. That's narrated by a musicologist, and so there's a lot of references to music and different books. And Inal is also he speaks Arabic, and he was a translator of Arabic and also Persian for a while. So there's many references to the Middle East and to Eastern themes, and so I guess I would just say that it's very poetic and referential and somewhat experimental, I guess. It's not. I mean, what I like about his work is that every novel is different. Like, and that's one of the things that makes me happy to be his translator is that every book is very different.
Very, very diverse. Very diverse stuff.
Yeah, so you never get bored when you're translating him. It's always interesting. There's always something new that I find out. Even just in the 5 pages that I do every day, there's a new book that I discover. So yeah, I really like that.
So when you say there are so many references, literary references or about music, depending on the book, do you get to gloss quite a lot in his translations?
I try not to gloss too much. I try not to add too many things. Sometimes I do have to add footnotes. But with Google, everybody can Google things now.
Yeah.
So.
That's right. That's right. Google is quite a help, for translators.
Yeah, so I just leave it up to the reader. I think the nice thing about his books is that there's a lot of faith in the readers to figure things out for themselves. I think he realizes that readers are smart. The readers of his work are smart, and yeah, they can Google.
Yeah, they can. So now, what is the working relationship like? Have you met him in person anytime?
Yeah, actually, the first time I met him was when Compass was shortlisted for the International Booker Prize in 2017. I'd already been translating him for several years at that point. I forget when Zone was published, but it was maybe 2010. Yeah, I think that was 2010. Is that right? Open Letter, yeah, and then Fitzcarraldo. So I had been translating him for 7 years before I met him, because I also did Street of Thieves and Tell Them of Battles, Kings and Elephants. So I met him in London in 2017 during the Booker Prize events. And he's a lovely person. He's very easy to get along with. He knows he's a translator himself, and so he knows what's involved in translation, and so he doesn't interfere. Like some authors can be a little annoying. I won't name any names, but they can get a little too interfering and want to change some things that don't need changing. But he's the opposite. He just lets me do what I want, and I think that trust is very important, like especially in an author-translator relationship. I think that for an author to have faith in the translator is very important, and it helps a lot when I'm translating because I don't feel like he's breathing down my neck. I feel like I can do what I want, and so the translations end up being very creative in a way. I mean, there's a lot of, I guess, love that goes into every translation. And I think he knows that. I think he realizes that um, each translation is a work of art in the same way that a novel is a work of art.
Now, the problem with English translators is many of the authors, they can read English thanks to British. Suppose if I'm translating in Telugu, a French novel, it's very unlikely that a French writer can read my translation.
No, that's true. And actually, it makes it unusual because his English is excellent. He speaks very good English. Sort of like British English, because I think he first learned English in Ireland. I think he spent a year in Ireland when he was in high school. So he says things like jolly well and cheerio.
Oh. Typical Irish expressions. Yeah.
But his English is excellent. So yeah. So that helps also. I mean, I think also that the ones that interfere are the ones who don't actually know English that well. I won't name any names.
Okay, so we'll come to the Deserters, which is longlisted, and hopefully it gets shortlisted on 31st of March. For the listeners who haven't read the novel, would you please introduce?
So The Deserters, there's two narratives. It starts out with a soldier who's deserting from a nameless war. We never find out what war it is, but we know it's somewhere in the Mediterranean. He's walking through a mountainous region, and he meets up with a woman who's also deserting from the same war with a donkey. And their interactions are what happened for part of the narrative. But then the other narrative is told by a German woman named Irina. And it's about her father, who is named Paul Heudeber, who's a mathematician and a communist. He lived in East Berlin. And he's very idealistic. And also about her mother, Maya, who was also idealistic, but in a different way. And so there's these two narratives, and they're told in a very different way. So the soldier narrative is in a very straightforward, sort of poetic narrative with very short sentences. And then the Berlin narrative, there's a conference taking place on a riverboat in Berlin. And that's all about, the conference is based on Heudeber, this mathematician. Who's the father of the narrator. And so the style of that is very complex and educated and lots of references. So they're very different narratives, and yeah, I think that's probably enough to say about it. I kept wondering how they were going to connect.
Now, this voice is quite different. That narrative and this narrative, the way it is done, it's quite different. How did you handle that? These different voices.
So in the same way where I don't read ahead, I never read a book before I translate it. So actually, I didn't even know that there was going to be another narrative. When I first started, I just thought it was the soldier. And then I found this other narrator speaking, and I'm like, oh, this is interesting. Different voice. So then I have to, the main thing when you translate is to capture the voice of the narrator. And that can take a while to get, especially if you don't read ahead. So usually it happens after the first maybe 50 pages or so for me, where I suddenly have the voice in my head, like, so I can actually write as if I'm that person. With a soldier, it was different because that is very poetic and sort of disjointed. But basically, my method is always the same. I never read ahead, and I just translate as I read, and so the text sort of speaks for itself. So I'm like discovering the story like the reader is, like as I'm translating it. And in a way, I think that helps for me creatively, because I feel as if I'm more part of the writing of the book. I haven't read it ahead. Like, I feel that the author hasn't read the book beforehand, so why should I? So I feel like I'm more a part of the creative process, writing the book as I'm translating it.
When you are translating from French to English, you are transacting between two languages, French and English. And I gather they are quite different in the way feelings are expressed. In a, even French, I was told that it's a very formal language compared to English. So when you are translating from French to English, what kind of changes that come into English as languages? How different are they?
Yeah, I think English can be a little bit more direct. I think French has, sometimes it takes a little bit longer to say things in French. Whereas sometimes English, you can say something in a shorter period of time. And also, what are the differences? It's a hard question to answer because I have to sort of look at the text as I'm doing it. All I can say is that when I have the voice in my head, I can speak it much more easily. It's because I'm a native English speaker, so once I know what who the person is and how they speak, it becomes much more natural for me to translate in that voice. Um, but it's hard for me to like pinpoint the differences in French and English just because I'm so caught up in the sentence at the time. So I guess I try not to make it sound too convoluted. I mean, that's the main thing, is to try to make it sound like spoken English, and like English that you would hear now. Especially because Énard is writing, it's a contemporary book, right? Especially the one I'm working on now. He's in Berlin, like pretty much now. So it should sound like ordinary spoken English, and there shouldn't be anything awkward about it. I guess that's what my goal is. It should sound as if it were written in English.
Your career in translation, literary translation. When you look back, how do you feel about
I just feel grateful that I'm able to like give interviews like this, and also that I'm able to translate someone like Énard. I feel very lucky as a translator, that I get to work with somebody whose work I respect, um, and and also with publishers like New Directions, who publish his books in America, and Fitzcarraldo in the UK. They're both really wonderful publishers to work with, and they both respect Énard's work a lot. Um, and so I feel like that I'm part of this project is of bringing his work into English means a lot to me, and I feel very grateful that I can do that.
So, would you please read Mathias Enard in French for us?
Yeah, so I'm going to read just the first page of Boussole, which is Compass. This is the one that was shortlisted in 2017. And I just chose this because of the sort of rhythmic quality in the prose. The first page is very rhythmic and poetic. And actually, it's very reminiscent of a poem by Victor Hugo called Demain de l'Aube, which I had to memorize in high school. So I thought I'd read the poem first, and then I'll just read the first page of Boussole. So the poem by Victor Hugo is, and also I should say, it's been a very long time since I've lived in France. So my French is very rusty, and so I hope French people will forgive me, but I'll do my best. Demain dès l'aube, à l'heure où blanchit la campagne, je partirai. Vois-tu, je sais que tu m'attends. J'irai par la forêt, j'irai par la montagne. Je ne puis demeurer loin de toi plus longtemps. Je marcherai les yeux fixés sur mes pensées, sans rien voir au dehors, sans entendre aucun bruit, seul, inconnu, le dos courbé, les mains croisées, triste, et le jour pour moi sera comme la nuit. Je ne regarderai ni l'or du soir qui tombe, ni les voiles au loin descendant vers Harfleur. Et quand j'arriverai, je mettrai sur ta tombe un bouquet de houes verts et de bruyères en fleurs. That's the Hugo poem. And then the first page of Boussole, or Compass. Nous sommes deux fumeurs d'opium, chacun dans son nuage, sans rien voir au dehors, seuls, sans nous comprendre, jamais nous fumons, visage agonisant dans un miroir. Nous sommes une image glacée à laquelle le temps donne l'illusion du mouvement, un cristal de neige glissant sur une pelote de givre dont personne ne perçoit la complexité des enchevêtrements. Je suis cette goutte d'eau condensée sur la vitre de mon salon, une perle liquide qui roule et ne sait rien de la vapeur qui l'a engendrée, ni des atomes qui la composent encore, mais qui, bientôt, serviront à d'autres molécules, à d'autres corps. Un nuage pesant lourd sur Vienne ce soir. Qui sait dans quelle nuque ruissellera cette eau, contre quelle peau, sur quel trottoir, vers quelle rivière, et cette face indistincte sur le verre n'est mienne qu'un instant, une des millions de configurations possibles de l'illusion. Tiens, M. Gruber promène son chien malgré la brune. Il porte un chapeau vert et son éternel imperméable. Il se protège des éclaboussures des voitures en faisant de petits bonds ridicules sur le trottoir. Le clébard croit qu'il veut jouer, alors il bondit vers son maître et se prend une bonne baffe au moment où il pose sa patte crasseuse sur l'impair de M. Gruber, qui finit malgré tout par se rapprocher de la chaussée pour traverser. Sa silhouette est allongée par les réverbères, flaque noircie au milieu des mers d'ombre des grands arbres, déchirée par les phares sur la porcelaine-gasse. Et Herr Gruber hésite apparemment à s'enfoncer dans la nuit d'Assergrund, comme moi à laisser ma contemplation des gouttes d'eau, du thermomètre et du rythme des tramways qui descendent vers Schottenthal.